And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the 2 Point Conversion NFL DFS podcast, your first one of the 2018-2019 season. It's going to be an awesome one. It's going to be myself. You can find me on Twitter at BDintric, and my co-host. You can find him on Twitter at Pater_DFS. James, how we doing, man?
Fantastic, man. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Just a week away. This time tomorrow in a week, so 8 days. It'll be go time.
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
I'm pretty pumped, man. I haven't gotten to watch much preseason. I've been busy with other things, but I'm really, really excited for the season start. I'm really, really excited for the Panthers to have another chance at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you guys actually look pretty good right now. Cam's healthy. CMC is going to be going crazy. You got to love what DJ Moore could bring to the team too. So
Dude,
fun times.
If I'm being honest, I'm a little worried about the offense. Because, I'm stoked that Cam is healthy, but the offensive line issues are, starting to pile up. There's already those injuries from the preseason, and, Greg Olsen is old and coming off of a broken foot. And as much as I like Christian McCaffrey, we've seen running backs go into that sophomore slump. And I don't know, they'll feed him. He's going to be good for fantasy, but I don't know if he's going to be, that great for the team overall. And I worry about the wide receiver. I don't know. I'm just kind of being a worry wart right now. I'm worried about the offense, I'm worried about the defense. I don't know. I don't know.
That's what fans do, though, James. Because as a Dolphins fan, I already planned on 7-9, 8-8, and I'm already hating life right now. So it's what we do.
Yeah, dude.
But we're here for people that remember last year. Bucks is doing his show over at Gup's Corner, and that's good for him. We wish him the best. It'll be the two of us this year rolling through the slates as we did, and it was a lot of fun last year. We're going to bring it to you yet again. Tonight, we're going to talk about a little, DFS strategy, kind of going over a few things we've gone about in the past, some research tools and whatnot that we might use. And then we're going to take our first peeks at the week one pricing for the main slate, talk a little value plays, and then next week we will be back with the full-on onslaught of the week one action. Before we do so, we do have a Twitter account now. Check us out at 2Point CONV DFS, 2Point CONV DFS. Out of all things, Twitter restricts is your title. So go figure. So go check that out. Follow us, and all the info will be there. But James, let's get at it, man. Let's talk a little strategy here. We'll kick it off with cash games. And I know you do play some cash. You play some GPP. There's definitely a difference when you're going to build your cash games. What kind of strategy are you looking to use?
Yeah, so with cash games, the idea is really to secure that floor, right? You want to focus on guys that are going to touch the ball as much as possible, and you want to have the value in that. So we're talking something like, we know that a quarterback's going to touch the ball on every team every single play. So it doesn't matter if you spend up at quarterback really in cash games. Everybody knows that you're going to be paying down at quarterback. Try to find those $5,500 6K quarterbacks that are going to be able to be in an advantageous situation for your team, raise that floor for not a lot of money. It's always the right thing to pay for David Johnson or Lev Bell or one of those high-priced running backs. You pretty much always have to have one in cash games. And then whatever the value back is for the week, if there's a backup that's in for an injured starter or whatever have you, if they're going to touch the ball 15 plus times for 3 to 5K, I think that you pretty much have to go there. And then always pay down at tight end and always pay down at defense. And that's whatever you want to do with your wide receivers. I think that's mostly fluid, But I think that I will say the one thing about NFL that is kind of different from other sports is I will eat the chalk all day long in NFL. Whereas in MLB, I don't like chalk even in cash games because I think that everything is so wild and crazy. I think you just eat the chalk all day long in football because we know those touches are going to be there. And even if they're not, you don't want to pass up on a 90% owned $3,500 running back and risk him going off. It's just not worth it in cash games in NFL.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing when you mention eating the chalk. It's especially on those value plays. When it's a free square for the week, just jump on it with everybody else. You don't want to miss, like you said, that $3,500 backup running back who now has a start that's going to get 20-plus touches. Don't be that guy and try to be cute in a cash game. If you want to in a GPP, we'll talk about that in a minute, sure. But when it comes to cash games, you want that floor, and that requires touches, which these value plays will have. So I'm with you there. The quarterbacks, like you said, a low-priced to mid-priced guy, you can try to find correlations with receivers. But when I'm looking at receivers, DraftKings is a PPR league, so I'm looking at guys that are going to be heavy targeted guys in the red zone. The new thing we might talk about more this year, as more data comes out, they're talking about the inside the 10 zone and all those things, because the touchdown rate increases. That's kind of a new stat they started developing last year, and it definitely changes your impression of things compared to the red zone to the 10 zone. It's a big difference compared to what you might expect. So those are little factors that we could factor in. But like you said, almost the very first sentence, I'm looking for guys with good floors all the way around. And you can find that at the tight end position for sure. And, we did it a lot last year when it came to defenses. We made a point, okay, what's your high price defense? What's your value defense? And more often than not, if not both of us, at least one of us would hit a cheap defense every week. Yeah. And it would just catapult you. So, yeah, those are kind of some of the main cash game things. Anything else on cash game wise you like to mention? Because we'll talk stacking in Vegas in a little bit, but it's kind of a Cliff Notesy version.
Yeah, I was going to mention with wide receivers, I think it's kind of the opposite of with running backs. Like if you have a value wide receiver, you still don't really have any guarantees, right? True. So with value running back, I think in cash games, it's right to just like eat that chalk and take Samaje Perine or whoever it is that's going to be that chalk piece. But with the chalk wide receiver that's really, really cheap, I think that's somewhere that if you want to differentiate, you absolutely can, because it's really, really hard to gauge, other than those elite wide receivers, where the ball is going to go on those passing plays. So I did just want to mention that.
No, that's a good point, because as much as you want the safety net of all these players, every year, all these DFS sports, all of them, are getting more and more competitive as people catch on to the way things work. Like the old days it was super simple. Just literally, you could take all your guys in like the $45,000 to $5,000 range and just keep them real simple. And as long as they had good floors, you were fine. Now you do have to differentiate a little bit, not like we will when we talk GPPs by any means, but you can't just, like you said, take all the chalk everywhere. But at running back, you have to. There's no getting around that one. That's a must do for sure. Let's talk GPP games, and that's something you had a lot of success at last year. You won some free contests, which for people that don't understand how hard that is like 5% of the entire contest might cash, and you won them. So that was very, very good. How do you approach your GPPs?
So generally with GPPs, what you're trying to do actively is just avoid the chalk. And find the best positions outside of what that chalk is. So when I took down those free rolls kind of towards the end of the year, my strategy was legitimately just to fade the two chalk running backs, because I knew for a fact that I had to differentiate by a lot with, I mean, it's a 20,000 person contest, and I know that in order to win those, you can't have everybody be chalky. I knew that I wanted like the Panthers in that one, so I had to get away from the running backs. And that's kind of like my basic strategy for GPPs. Like I think that you can and should take advantage of good spots, even if it's chalky, but you have to be super different otherwise. Like if for week one, if the Panthers, for example, are going to be the chalk, I don't have a problem stacking the Panthers. I don't have a problem building 50 lineups with the Panthers as my base stack, but every single one of those stacks is not going to have Lev Bell. It's not going to have Alvin Kamara. Like you have to find those pivot points that are at lower ownership so that you can pass large points to the table. I mean, if somebody is 35% owned and they put up like a 3-point stinker, but you have somebody in the relatively same price range that puts up 30, you already passed 35% of the field in that position. You feel me? So that's the basic GPP idea for me, is really finding the pivots off of the chalk in the same price point. I think that the general building style, like you said, DFS has gotten so much sharper, and the general public's gotten so much sharper that I think people pretty much understand what the general building style needs to be at this point in order to maximize like your optimized range of outcomes. So finding those pivots within those price points that stick with that kind of same paradigm is really, really important. Something I'll focus a lot on this year.
Yeah, you're really, really good at it. I'm getting there. I still have certain weeks where I find myself a little chalkier than I'd like to be, but it's getting there. And the biggest thing is you were saying it there is you don't have to fade all the chalk. Like, you have it's about a 9-man roster or something like that. If you have 2 or 3 guys that are 25 to 30%, it's not ideal and it won't work every week. But you see it happen a lot when the Millie guys take it down. It's like you said, the rest of that lineup now, when you go to your backup running back and say you want to spend $5,500, whatever guy's chalky there's where you pivot, like you said. Right. Make your pivots elsewhere. So if you want that stud stack, like you said, if Carolina's the top stack, you don't have to fade Carolina. If Carolina goes off, you obviously needed to have it, but you can differentiate elsewhere. And one thing that I'll recommend, because we use it for the golf podcast all the time, is FanShare Sports. They do amazing golf projections, and they've already done some great stuff for football coming up. And if their projections are ownership projections are anywhere close to what golf was, it's a useful tool, because I do it on Wednesday nights. I start looking around at what their projections are, and I'll look at that pivot range right there, and it makes light and day difference. So there's little tools like that. We'll talk about some other tools coming up, but ownership wise, they're one of the ones I really, really like. You might have some you like. We can plug those away too. There's a ton of stuff like that, but GPP wise, and I think one position, if you really want to be different more often than not, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or if you have a better idea, is usually if you pay up at tight end, you'll differentiate yourself most weeks.
Yeah. I think that unlocking that ceiling of someone like Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski or something like that's a really, really good way to be different. And that goes back to what I was talking about, kind of like so we know that people like to pay down at tight end, and that's like the cash game strategy. And people put their cash game lineups in the tournaments all the time because they want to say, oh, well, if I hit the nuts in cash games, I want to take down a tournament with it too. It's like that hardly ever happens. Like it is very, very rare that you're going to take something down with the cash game lineup because the building is just not good for GPPs. You're not focusing enough on getting those high price things. So yeah, I think at a tight end, if you differentiate at tight end and take a Gronkowski, or if the chalk QB is going to be like Baker Mayfield, 5,500 or something like that, and you pay up for Aaron Rodgers, that's going to lead you to stack the Packers, which is going to be way different because you're going to be paying up for Devontae Adams or whoever. I think that if you make that one choice, if you make a drastic enough choice of paying different at QB or tight end, you're naturally going to have a different build, and you're naturally going to be fading chalk in spots that you probably regularly wouldn't. So I agree. That's a good GPP mindset. Even if it's not something where you're actively trying to fade the chalk, you naturally will.
Yeah, and there's some other things we've talked about in the past too, is if you're not playing the Sunday only slate, well, fade Thursday night because everyone's going there. You'll already be better off doing stuff like that. There's different ways to stack instead of, if you want the big time quarterback, well, I'm not saying ever fade Antonio Brown, but maybe go Juju, and you still get the big Pittsburgh offense, and you never know. Little things like that changes everything, but you still get the piece of the pie that you're looking for, which makes it pretty good for you. Little things like that, and we'll talk about that week in and week out. We'll mention, hey, this is the pivot here. Like, we like this guy. We're not saying don't play this guy, but this is why we'd rather play this guy for just strategy reasons. That's part of the deal, because anybody can. We can all sit here and read off the list of players and tell you every play and walk away. That's easy, but you don't gain anything from that. So that's the type of stuff there, and that's why we have the Twitter handle. Let us know if you guys have questions on anything throughout the week. Let us know. The DMs are open. Yep,
always.
All right, let's talk about types of stacks now, because you hear we are just mentioned, quarterback, wide receiver. Sometimes, you have a stud running back that catches the ball a lot. Sometimes you have a running back defense correlation. How do you approach stacking?
Man, so in cash games, it's always QB wide receiver. And I think that it is constantly silly whenever somebody's like, well, I'm not going to stack in cash games because the quarterback could throw 4 touchdowns to 4 different wide receivers, and then whoever my wide receiver 1 isn't actually going to be that good. It's like, well, okay, yeah, sure. But if your quarterback throws 4 touchdowns and you have one of them on your roster, you're still having that quarterback. You're still having all that upside. Like it's worth it in the long run. We know that quarterback to wide receiver 1 is the highest correlation in football. So I think in cash games, it's really, really silly when people just choose to take a quarterback like Tyrod Taylor was the one last year where everybody's like, oh, well, you don't need to stack him because he's going to get a rushing touchdown. Like, well, okay, sure. But even if he gets a rushing touchdown, you're still saying that he's not going to throw a touchdown to his wide receiver 1, which I think that you're really hoping for something weird to happen at that point. And you're not really putting yourself in a good spot. But I personally, I really, really, really like quarterback, running back stacks. I think I'm going to focus a lot on
this. That's a way to differentiate yourself too.
Yeah, because people don't want to do it because they kind of think that it lowers your upside, and to a point it does, sure. But if your quarterback throws 2 touchdowns or throws 3 touchdowns, right, and he throws 2 to the running back and 1 to a wide receiver, then you've gotten the entire offense except for that 1 wide receiver, and you can still do a QB running back 1 wide receiver 1 stack as well. I just think that that's kind of a hole that the public has moved away from and kind of dug themselves a little bit deeper in that thought that they can't take a running back with their quarterback. And I'm probably going to do that a lot this year with the Jared Goff situation with Todd Gurley, or people still do it with Ben Roethlisberger and Lev Bell, but I don't think they do it enough. I think they'd rather pay for Antonio Brown. So that's something that I'm going to focus on. But when we talk about like base stacks, QB wide receiver 1 is important. QB wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 can be good if we have an offense that's super concentrated. And then QB tight end 1 works in like 2 situations with Tom Brady and Alex. No. Who's going to be throwing
Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I probably won't use that one very often because I'm not sure that I think Mahomes is good, but we'll see. Regardless, if you have a tight end that is very, very good, you can stack them with their quarterback, but don't do it very often. Like, you're not ever going to want to go Andrew Luck, Jack Doyle as your main stack because that's silly.
Yeah, and because in reality, if you're stacking the wide receiver 1, even if he doesn't get to the end zone, he's still going to probably get you 5-6 receptions and a handful of yards. Where the tight end, you're praying for touchdowns. Like, you don't have all that extra leverage most of the time, unless you're Gronk or you're Kelsey, stuff like that. I do love the quarterback running back thing. I think it's not used nearly enough, like you said, because like you said, what if he throws 2 to the running back and 1 to the receiver? My theory also is okay, say he throws 3 touchdowns, but to 3 different receivers, and then your running back runs 2 in. Well, now you got 5. Like, there's so many scenarios where that running back can be a massive factor if it's a passing team or a running back like a Gurley or a Lev Bell or so many of these new ones like a McCaffrey where they can catch and run. Like, they're big impact on both parts of the offense, and I don't think it's used nearly enough. The other stack I kind of mentioned earlier, running back defense. It's interesting, and it can kind of have a Vegas twist to it if it's kind of a defensive battle, a lot of running game, like a team with a big running format, like the Ravens are always popular for that. There's few teams like that week by week, kind of a week by week basis, we might actually talk about it fits the Ravens week 1 for one, but that's the kind of other option there. But it seems like when that one's available each week, it seems to be more popular than it should be. So it kind of disappoints when I'm looking at it. We'll kind of tie Vegas into the stacks because I have a few stacking questions with Vegas. Now, when I'm stacking, I look at Vegas for certain reasons. What do you look at when you see Vegas lines, when it's the team totals, the spreads that impact stacking for you?
So if a team doesn't have a total over 25, it's not really a situation where I'm going to go all in on them. Because that's kind of the cutoff is 25 points. Under that, we see a pretty drastic drop in production from fantasy standpoint, and over that is where we actually see those explosion games. And again, it's not always a situation where if it's above 25 points, I'm still going to go after it. Like I really, really, really like to focus on home teams. And I'm a big believer that home teams with a high total will surpass away teams with a large total by a pretty decent margin. I need to do more research on that later, but when you're a home team, think about the effect that a crowd can have on an away team. When you have a loud stadium, when you have the Chiefs stadium, when you have Seattle, when you have Denver, away teams have to come in, and so much of their offense happens at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you're not going to have the play every single time. You're not going to be able to audible. And I think that helps defenses more than people understand. So when it comes to those kind of things, Vegas totals, I like them more when they're at home. We know that certain teams have a significantly better total at home. Green Bay and New England have some of the largest home spreads in the league. They're worth 4 points, I think, when they're at home rather than when they're away. So thinking about those kinds of things. When it comes to the spread, I'm not really generally too worried about the spread because if we understand who teams are, we know that it should be a blowout or it shouldn't be a blowout. Like when it comes down to teams that are more evenly matched, like the Dolphins and the Ravens or something like that. I don't know. When it's like a 2 or 3 point spread, I think you can focus on that. But when it becomes a blowout spread, at that point, I'm not even considering the other team anyway. And I don't really want to consider a team that's going to have to come from behind either, even though that's like that's like this big thing in the DFS community. It's like, oh, well, the quarterback's going to throw more often. Well, Okay, but if they only have an implied total of like 17 points, then do I really care about their offense? I don't. I really don't. But I do care about New England, even if they're a 10-point favorite, because they're going to score a lot of points to be a 10-point favorite. And people don't want to play them because they'll trail off in the fourth quarter. Well, yeah, after Tom Brady's thrown 6 touchdowns, you know? So I think that people focus maybe a little bit too much on spread in making their decisions. I'd rather just have a team that's going to score a lot of points. I don't care when they do it, if it's in the first quarter or the fourth quarter. I just want a lot of touchdowns. So that's really how I look at it. I just want high totals, and specifically high totals at home, just because I think offenses work better in those situations.
No, you're 100% correct there. I love the 25-point threshold. Like, if you see team totals at 25 or above, those are definitely stacking options for sure. The totals, like when they're kind of lower, I really like that home defense because, like you said, the defense does help you. So there's where you can kind of find the cheaper defenses from time to time. And then just the overall game totals when they're high, I like those if like the spread's tight, because then it's more of a shootout where you can kind of maybe go a little contrarian with the road team just for the fact that they expect it to be close. Now, does that always happen? No. But when you're looking for a little differentiation, that's one thing you can look at there.
Yeah.
I agree. The garbage time thing, like you hear that all the time from everybody. And I see like the point to a fraction. Like I get it, what they're trying to say. But then you brought it back perfectly. Well, if their team total is still only 17 and they lose 28-17, did they really benefit you at all?
Right.
No. So I completely agree with you there, and it'll make it really, really interesting. That's kind of where Vegas is good and where it's bad. And the spread, I agree. The team total is much more important than the spread to me, and we'll see how that goes throughout the season.
I do have to say, though, that watching team totals has been a huge, huge boon to my play over the last couple of years. And watching those movements and looking for reverse line movement. Reverse line movement is massive in the NFL. Yep. Like we see it a lot on these East Coast team or West Coast teams going east. Mm-hmm. We see like when the Cardinals have to go play the Giants or something like that, and we know that they're not a good road team. One, because they have to go from a dome to outside, and two, they then have to go from West Coast to East Coast time, so they're losing hours of sleep. We see this reverse line movement where if they're like a favorite at first and then all of a sudden some huge money comes in and now they're a dog on the road, that's huge. I won't touch an offense in that situation. And I've been adamant about trying to watch those kinds of things because these huge Vegas bettors, I mean, they're putting hundreds of $1,000s on the line. And when you see that sharp money come in, and you can watch at like the VegasLines.com or whatever, you can watch and see each individual move. You can see like the bets placed. And that's really important for me, is watching that stuff, especially Thursday morning. I'll watch it as these bets are coming in. Watch the line movements. Pay attention to it because it is important. It's big.
Yeah, on the spreads and the team totals. You can get a lot of kind of sneakier stacking options, you could say, based on some changes in the totals. What kind of total do you need, or do you ever want to game stack?
I don't know. I don't think that one's so much a total based one. I mean, each team kind of has to have a total over 21 for me to really consider it. So like a total game score of like 42.5 or 43 or something like that, I think is really important. It needs to be implied that each team is going to score at least 3 runs. And I actually kind of like to fade the highest game total overall on a slate. Like whenever the Saints are at home and they're facing another team that throws a lot, I like to fade that because if they have a total game score of like 54 or something like that, we saw that a couple times last year, and then the Packers are playing like the Jets or something at home, and the Packers go entirely overlooked because their total game score is only like 48. That's a beautiful spot. I mean, you can get a lot of lower ownerships and some discounted ownerships on that just because there's another game that's going to be so highly focused on. So I usually like to try to fade that high one, but to answer your question, it's like 42, 43 is when I start to consider a game stack.
All right. Last thing I'll ask here is, you kind of talked about it with Tyrod Taylor, guys saying, I want to play him because he's going to run it in. People use Cam Newton a lot, Russell Wilson, and places with a bunch of running or wide receivers. You don't really know where it's going to go in an offense. Do you ever naked quarterback?
No, absolutely not. I just no. I mean, I understand why people do it, right? Like, I get why people do it with Cam Newton, because Cam Newton will run it in 1, maybe 2 times if he has a good game. I get why people do it with Tyrod Taylor, because he didn't have any actual options to throw to. So it was pretty much just him and LaShawn McCoy the entire year. I don't actually understand why people do it with Russell Wilson, because you could very easily stack his entire team, and except for the running backs, which are always a black hole on Seattle, and get a couple touchdowns out of it. Russell Wilson was one that I didn't really understand going naked with, but no, because I'm bigger on, I'll make at least 10 lineups per slate. So if I'm going to make at least 10 lineups, like, I'm going to have different variations of a team stack, and I'm not going to just depend on a quarterback, because if you think about that, right? If you think about going naked quarterback, and you say, okay, I don't know where it's going to go, so I'm just going to take the quarterback. Then you have to guess at every single other position. You have to guess of a wide receiver on another team. You have to guess 3 wide receivers, maybe 4 if you're doing flex. You have to guess both the running backs. Like, you're basically putting together this huge 9-team parlay and assuming that you're going to get it right. Like, I would rather focus on one spot and hope that it just goes all the way off, and stack wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and like even the tight end. If I have a huge spot that I want to attack, I'd rather do it that way than try to put together a 9-person parlay.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. It's really, really tricky, and kind of takes away, I guess, leverage in theory of what you're trying to build with your lineup. Well, you mentioned 10 lineup builds. How do you try to, like, say there's 3 to 5 teams you really, really like that week? How do you decide how many you're stacking in your 10 total lineups?
So I usually stack 3 teams specifically. So I'll usually do 50 lineups, and at least 10, but normally 50. And I'll focus on 3 teams, whether it be like the Packers, the Panthers, and then the Saints. Sure, whatever. Yeah. And I'll do that. Each one of those will be 30% of my lineups, so that I have 90% of my total lineups built from those 3 teams. And then I'll do 5% of just like off the wall stuff, like stack the Browns or something like that. And then I'll do 5% of just straight optimizer stuff based on projections. And sometimes that ends up being something that I already have. Sometimes that ends up being the Panthers. Sometimes that ends up being the Packers or something like that. But I try to hand build, or I try to like be different with that 90% with those 3 teams. And then I have 10% of just like stuff, whatever like catches my eye or whatever. I'm like, maybe this can happen. I don't know. And that's usually the way that I divvy it up. And I do the same thing across all sports. I try to focus on 3 specific spots, 30% dedicated to each spot, and then 10% of more off the wall stuff.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I talk about it a lot on the golf podcast I do. Is I have my core. These are like my 3 guys that are pretty much going to be everywhere outside of maybe a couple, and then I build around that with and that's how you differentiate your lineups from deal to deal. And when your core's hit, you have a huge week. So it works out pretty darn good. And that's why I wanted to ask, because I recommend people don't make 10 lineups that are all completely different. Have something in common with them. So if it goes off, you win all 10, like you're winning your 10 lineups. There's a lot to be said about that.
And usually what'll happen in those builds is like there's going to be really, really good value plays that are going to be involved in all of them, right? Like I'm going to have probably 70. I have a really high tolerance for variance. So I'm okay with setting my exposure limits up there at like the 65, 70% range. So I'll end up with maybe 70% of a value wide receiver, or 70% of a value running back, or something like that, that will show up a lot. And that will be my core. I'll usually have like 4 or 5 players that are up there above the 50% range. But I always try to get those kind of like sprinkles in there as well, you know? And that's where things like I'll plug Daily Roto later, but American Numbers has done a great job with the optimizer for Daily Roto that's included in the package. And that kind of thing is really important for me when I'm doing those exposure limits, because it's important for me to make sure that I have enough difference and enough of a core with my builds.
Gotcha. I like it a lot. Let's talk about some research tools, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you basically just told us your process, so that answers that question. And I do mine as we do the show on Wednesday, and then I kind of listen to a few other things, read a few things, look at a few more stats. You'll hear most of my process when we record on Wednesdays. I go through most of the tools I use that night. And then I just kind of watch ownership and everything after that. I try to build everything, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and then I just kind of tweak it based on ownership. I try not to tweak it too much because of what hearsay is. It's all ownership based from there. Let's talk about your daily roto. What kind of tools do you use to build those lineups?
Yeah, I mean, Daily Roto is fantastic. They've stepped up their game a lot. They've always had really, really good projections in the industry, but they have last football season or last basketball season they teamed up with American Numbers on Twitter, and he's been building optimizers and working with their projections, kind of streamline things. And he's done an incredible job in making sure that things run well and run quickly and do a really, really good job and are competitive with the rest of the industry. So I did use Fantasy Cruncher for a long time. And I love Fantasy Cruncher. That's a great, great product. But now I use exclusively the Daily Roto Optimizer because I don't have to export projections and I don't have to make those changes later on because they happen, in time. So that optimizer is fantastic. Outside of Daily Roto, I use Football Outsiders, obviously. I use Fantasy Labs Vegas tab because you can see kind of everything going and you can sort by team total, you can sort by line movement, you can sort by all that stuff. That's a great free tool that you can use. And then, like I said, I use the Vegas Lines website as well so that I can actually go in and specifically, you can click on a game and you can see the line movement on both sides. And you can see when it was done, what time it was done, how much it moved. That's probably been my biggest one, especially for baseball. That one was huge because you'd watch sharp bettors come in and a sharp bettor would place a bet somewhere. And then you could see every single casino would change their line by this much based on the sharp bettor's movement. So all of that stuff's really, really important to me. I think that there are a lot of other really, really good, more accessible tools out there. Football Outsiders obviously is free. Roto Grinders has a lineup optimizer as well that's built into their site that I think does a good enough job. If you don't have a subscription to Daily Roto, I obviously suggest that you get one because the projections are fantastic. But if you don't, there's plenty of other ways to go out there and optimize yourself up 50, 100 lineups if you want to throw them into some contest.
Yeah, I agree. There's tons of options. Just kind of pick whatever works for you because Daily Roto works great for you. I mentioned FanShare and their projections. They're building a lineup optimizer. I've not used it yet. Their golf one works great, but I gotta imagine the guys that are coming in to work for them would do good work. A lot of guys I know are working at the Quant Edge. They do great stuff there. They have a lot of awesome tools that they can use. So basically what I'm saying is there's tons of sites that we can all vouch for. So it's whatever fits your fancy and works for you to do stuff like that. But there's also the free stuff like the Roto Grinders. You can make lineups there for free, like you said. The Fantasy Insider, I like a few other ones if you can get to the free stuff. Some of the stuff on 4 for 4 or those guys is free. It depends on what article you want to read. But there's tons and tons of stuff out there to help you out. And hopefully one of the mainstays is Wednesday nights with me and James. That'll help you quite a bit.
And also, I might end up putting together a Twitch stream or something like that on Tuesday nights or Thursday morning or something like that, building lineups and just kind of talking with people and going over questions and stuff like that. I think I'm going to put something together for that too. So just wanted to plug that too. So if you get enough of me on here, I understand I'm super annoying sometimes, but if you don't, then you can always find me and I'll send out my Twitch on my Twitter as well.
Yeah, go check that out. And then I always talk about it on my Twitter feed. The Slack chat we have over at Sports Degens. They have one for Daily Roto. Just come and ask questions, talk to people, stuff like that. Where you're not in the face of Twitter, you can actually be in a smaller scene. Helps out everybody. So tons of options is what we're saying. Don't be afraid to ask. Last thing I want to ask you before we kind of get into some week 1 value plays. How do you evaluate contest sizes? Because I have a certain way to do it, but you might have a different strategy.
So I enter the Millie Maker every week because I think that it's silly not to. I don't think that you should do it as a way to build your bankroll. I think that it's an awful, awful, awful payout structure for building your bankroll, but I think that it's a fantastic payout structure as far as earned value. And when you talk about EV, there's nothing that's going to make you $1 million faster than winning that contest. So I think that always enter the Millie Maker. When I'm looking at contests, I try to keep things under 1,000 entrants. For NFL, it's a little bit more difficult because the contests are just so much larger since there's just one a week. But in baseball, especially, I didn't like to enter any contest that had over 500 entrants. I think that you're just really, really shooting yourself in the foot. You have to be really different to take down anything that has these like 10,000, 15,000 entries. It's just not good from an EV standpoint. And unless you're really, really good, and unless you can afford to max enter all of them, I just don't think they're really worth your time. So I prefer to stick to things that are under 1,000 entrants, build your bankroll. It's surprising. People look at them and they're like, oh, well, this contest only pays out 2,000 first. It's like, yeah, but if you hit that 3 times through the season, your bankroll is $6,000 more. And you can still have a nice flat payout structure. Whereas if it's 2,000 a first and then like 1,000 a second and it goes down and down and down, and you still have like a 25% payout structure, at least you're not getting beat by the rake. Like you want to get beat by other people, not by the rake. So I try to look for lower entry contests. I personally like the $100, $150 contests because those fit my style best, I think. But it's personal preference, I know there's people that don't like to enter that and would prefer to max enter the quarter, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's the biggest thing. It's to each their own. I think a great way to build your bankroll is if you're going to play cash games, try to play like the single entry cash games at first, because you'll get a lot of pros in there that do like the max entry of a cash game. And all of a sudden your 50-50 now isn't really 50-50, if you know what I mean, because there's so many differences there. That's one thing to look at. When it comes to GPPs, I'm a 1 to 3 max type guy. That's what I prefer to go dabble in. And that also kind of contest size, like you say. And what I do for all sports is, because it changes week to week, I do see what the rake is. Like I'll look at each contest and, if 1 week it's only 20% cash, and well, maybe I go look elsewhere. Like I don't want to just give it away. I want that. Give me at least like the 24.5-ish. Like give me that one that's close to 25 and above, because you'll find some each week where it's all of a sudden a 28% rake and, our payout, and you're a lot better off. So do the research ahead of time is what we're saying, and do what contest fits you best and go from there. But if you're going to build bankroll, especially early in the year, I know we talked about it last year, James, cash game lineups can be very, very helpful early in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think the GPPs early in the season are a really, really good time to be different, because everybody kind of looks at the stats from last year. But the only things, and I think it was TJ from 4for4 that posted this on Twitter, the only things that really are sticky year to year for a defense to defend against are wide receivers and running backs. Defenses are not good at continuously being good year over year against quarterbacks and tight ends. So in the beginning of the year, I mean, we see these people refuse to use a quarterback against a certain defense because it was great last year, but it's not like that year to year. It's hard for defense coordinators to continue to change that up for quarterbacks and tight ends specifically, because if you think about what covering a tight end is, defenses that were bad against tight end 1 year can literally just pull their safety up 10 yards. And now they're all of a sudden the best team in the league against tight ends. So I think that in the beginning of the year, GPPs are really, really lucrative because people get stuck in last year's mindset.
That is a great, great point. And I'll reference some stats from last year once in a while, but it's until week 4 or 5 where you could kind of at least start slowly planting a flag in the NFL, because it's not like other sports. You could get a bigger sample size. You're very limited. Otherwise, you'll be in the dust in football. But, yeah, the first few weeks, it's more kind of, if chatter's going one way, like you said, kind of look the other way. And we'll kind of go there a lot this year. Now let's talk about a few value plays at each position. It'll be the first time glancing at these prices and taking a good deep dive here. We'll start out at quarterback, and, you got Brady up top, which you expect, but you get into that kind of mid-6 range. You got Phillip Rivers, and, Kansas City can be a very rough defense. He's 6,400. If you want to go deeper down, if they believe Seattle's defense is going to be bad and Russell Wilson has to play, you got him for 62. But, a couple that stand out to me below 6K, everybody hates them, and I know we debated with it a lot last year, but the Giants defense, we'll see. Maybe it's good, but Blake Bortles at 56 catches my attention, and Ryan Tannehill at 53. They're not great quarterbacks, but at those price points could come into play. Again, this is just preliminary talk, guys. We'll really give in some deeper insight next week, but those are a couple that stand out to me. Is there any that really kind of stand out to you?
Case Keenum. at 5,100 at home against Seattle's defense.
It's going to be dreadful. Very good call.
Oh, my God. Like, Seattle's defense is so bad. Give me all the Case Keenum. I'm going to have to stack the Broncos week 1. I'm not even happy about that.
Yeah, but that's one of those good.
Ridiculous. 5,100. Okay, so, yeah, Case Keenum is way too cheap.
What about Bradford?
What up?
What do you think about Bradford at 52 against Washington?
Dude, yeah, that's that's so egregious. 7,200 for Tom Brady, that's fine. Like, I don't think that's a bad idea. I am a little bit worried about New England's O-line, so I'm not sure that I want them up against Merciless and J.J. Watt healthy coming off last year. I'm sure that Drew Brees would be popular at 6,800. Marcus Mariota at 6,300 probably doesn't look awful against the Dolphins. Ben Roethlisberger 6,600 against Cleveland. There's your. Oh no, actually, he won't be chalk because he's on the road against Cleveland, and nobody plays Ben Roethlisberger on the road. So that's actually a spot that might be rad.
So we will play him on the road.
Yeah, people hate playing him on the road. Everybody will play Lev Bell. Nobody will play Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, quarterback Case Keenum is just an egregious value week 1. That's really that's just bad pricing, and that's the DraftKings algorithm going off of last year, you know. Yep. And we're going to see that for the first couple of weeks. It's not going to catch up. We're going to be able to exploit quarterbacks against Seattle's defense for 3, maybe 4 weeks, I think, before the algorithm actually catches up. So, yeah, and then Joe Flacco at 4,900 against Buffalo.
I don't hate it, but I remember vividly last year many times when you call. You can't play Joe Flacco.
Dude, no. Okay, last year I was so mad because like week 1 I played Joe Flacco on accident in cash. I didn't even want to play him. I was so adamant in fading him, and I ended up with like $1,200 riding on Joe Flacco. I was so mad about it. It turned out okay, but like, man, that was bad. I don't know. Joe Flacco sucks, but he'll probably be better this year after having some really bad TD luck last year.
Yeah, he should be much better. And Crabtree should help with that a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's go to the running back position. You have your main guys up top: the Bell, Johnson, Kamara, Elliott, the works. You get down to the 6K range. Look, it's interesting. Again, Kansas City's defense suspect. You got Gordon at 68. You got like Dalvin Cook against a Niners defense that's not going to be very good at 62. Kenyon Drake's 5,900. Alex Collins against Buffalo's 56. There's going to be a ton more. Those are a couple that really stand out at first look. Lamar Miller at 52. Definitely some options. Anything at first look really standing out to you?
Yeah, you mentioned Lamar Miller, and I think that that's a spot that in GPPs for 5,200, Lamar Miller doesn't even really have a backup right now. I mean, he has Alfred Blue, but they really don't like to use Alfred Blue that much.
So again, he doesn't have a backup.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, they don't like to use Alfred Blue very much, and we saw them feed him last year. And I'm going to make kind of a bold call right now that Lamar Miller is going to have a great year.
Oh, I'm with you. I've been on him in most leagues, 4th round. Bring him on.
I drafted him in the Daily Roto season long as well, and I got some flack for it. But like we saw Todd Gurley have this awful second year, getting fed the ball constantly, and then he comes out and he's the fantasy champion, and I kind of think that something similar is going to happen with Lamar Miller. His efficiency was really bad last year, but they fed him, and we know that the volume is going to be there. So for 5,200, I don't hate him against New England, especially because we know Belichick's going to take away DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
And I don't think that Deshaun Watson is going to have that magic that he had last year. So I'm on Lamar Miller, especially week 1. Dalvin Cook, like, I don't know, dude. Lower body injuries scare the hell out of me.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely.
Like, yeah, San Francisco was a sieve. They were the worst against the run last year. They had like 7 weeks straight allowing a 100-yard rusher, and they're not going to be good again this year. They'll be better with Reuben Foster and with some of their draft picks, but I don't think they'll be good. So I like Dalvin Cook. Christian McCaffrey, hard shot, calling it now, 40% owned. That price is dumb. 6,400 is dumb. That's dumb. So, and then Lev Bell. So it looks like so far, week 1, we're going to have, I don't know who will be quarterback, but Lev Bell and Christian McCaffrey are just going to be like hard chalk. Guarantee it.
Yep, that's the early looks at those two positions. Let's go to the wide receiver. We already mentioned Antonio Brown's in a great spot at Cleveland. Michael Thomas against Tampa could be interesting. Keenan Allen's finally priced up for a Chargers guy.
Is he though?
Well, compared to Rivers and Gordon's what I'm saying. Yeah, but not in that matchup. Not the way that defense looks. That's for damn sure. Value-wise, he should be, in my opinion, he should be right behind Antonio Brown.
I think he should be at least 8K. Yeah,
he should be right there. But if you want to look value, you could look down at Stephon Diggs at 63. We always talked about him as a GPP guy. This is where you're going to find a lot of it, though, because Demaryius Thomas could be a sneaky one if you do your Keenum stack. Yeah, that's a sneaky one. Michael Crabtree's 54 if you want to go with Flacco. That's just a couple at first look. Even Emmanuel Sanders at 5K if you want to be a little different. So what do you like in here?
I'm stacking the Broncos. I'm absolutely stacking the Broncos week 1.
Things we never thought we'd say.
There's not a single piece of that stack over 6K. Come on, dude. That's not even fair. Please, God, don't be chalk. Who's gonna be chalk? Wait. No, we need to find out who the chalk team is gonna be week 1, because it can't be the Broncos, or I'll be depressed.
It's probably gonna be the Chargers, because all I heard the last couple of weeks is how bad Kansas City's defense is in the preseason. Right. Because Rivers and Gordon were too cheap. Allen at 75 is too cheap. I could see that being some chalk.
I hope that it's the Chargers. I hope that it's the Chargers and the Steelers, because I will go with like 10 to 15% on Broncos all day. I will max the milli with that. Like, that's ridiculous. Let's see. Odell Beckham Jr. is only 7K against Jacksonville, which is.
I love it, because everyone's going to say that Jacksonville defense, and it's still very, very good, but give me OBJ at 7K. Come on.
Dude, Jalen Ramsey is ridiculous, though.
Yeah. No, I agree. But
I think week 1, like, OBJ is an elite play. I do. It's hard for wide receivers to get entirely shut down by anyone. And OBJ coming off, like, that injury last year, I like that. You mentioned Stephon Diggs. I think Stephon Diggs is the top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. He doesn't deserve to be 6,300. Jarvis Landry is 5,500, which is egregious. Yep. Man, these wide receiver prices are really, really interesting.
Go down to $4,100. There's 2 names right there that both could be value.
Marquise Goodwin at 4,600. Chris Godwin, 4,100.
And
that
DJ
makes sense.
Moore.
He was your boy last year.
Yep. But for punt play, if you need to punt one, because think about it, you could stack Denver, and then you could still get like Antonio Brown and Gronk.
You can go. You could stack Denver. You could go Dante Moncrief, who's going to have like a huge workload. If you believe that Bortles is not going to suck this year, I still think he sucks. But if you believe that he's not going to suck this year, Dante Moncrief at 4K against the Giants is really, really nice. He should have like a good workload. Or Keelan Cole at 3,800. Like,
I was going to say, you could go Moncrief because everyone's going to want to play Keelan Cole.
Well, I mean, you could stack them both if you really wanted to. True. The Giants are better up front than they are on the back end. So
true.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. And then Albert Wilson for 3,700 against Tennessee. Yeah. Like, we know that they play that zone defense, and if Albert Wilson's going to be outside, then I like that. Yeah, these prices are really, really interesting. This is pretty wild.
We're going to have some fun with this next week. So the tight end position, again, Gronk is at a very nice $6,900. DraftKings did a solid on that one. Then you got Kelsey and Olsen, so the usual guys up top, but still not as pricey as we saw at times last year. But, if you want to go down, Jack Doyle's 36 if we have a healthy Luck. I love Njoku at $3,400. I know the Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh, but that guy's kind of a freak if you want to get a little action in that one. Other than that, maybe Ricky Seals-Jones at 3K. This one you kind of dig around some more, but anything standing out at the position?
Well, like I mentioned with the year over year for defenses, just looking at this, Pittsburgh's not going to be number one against tight ends this year. They're not. So I really like Njoku, especially considering he's been on the field so often in the preseason with the starters, and they've been feeding him up a little bit. And he's a very, very, very good athlete. So I like that a lot. I think, let's see. So people are going to be all over. Who is it? It's going to be.
You got Gronk.
Who's Pitt? Vance McDonald. Right. People are going to be all over Vance McDonald against Cleveland. People are going to be all over whoever the starting tight end for Jacksonville, Osafarian Jenkins, is going to be. Like, people are going to be all over those two at 3,200, and that's where I think that you're going to be able to be the most different in week one is fading those two, because people like pretty much half of Al Zeidenfeld's Twitter feed during the year is just the flow chart of tight ends against the Browns. That's pretty much half of his entire feed. So I know that he's going to get talked up. I'm sure that Vance McDonald's going to be one of the highest owned tight ends on the slate. And I think that going up, like we talked about with paying up for Gronk or something like that earlier, where paying up for a tight end to be different, I think that's smart this week, or just like pivoting to someone close. I really like Njoku for 3,400 and getting away from Vance McDonald, or even like you can go down a little bit farther and you can find, I don't know, man, there's going to be plenty of value at tight end for the first week, and I don't think you need to go with those chalks.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's go to the defenses real quick. The Ravens are the popular one I've heard so far, but they're $3,800, and they're the highest priced one, so maybe not, because some people don't pay up at the position. But when you get down, let's say 3K and below, it's going to be interesting here early on. Maybe Cincinnati, if Andrew Luck's not completely healthy. It's risky. It's crazy, but you never know. If you want to go home, Arizona at home is always very interesting. I know Washington's offense is a lot better, but that could be something to kind of keep a little bit of an eye on. Other than that, this will definitely take some time. Maybe if you want to get real weird, Houston at $2,200 because they're going to have a healthy J.J. Watt. They have the Honey Badger now. You can get really weird with that one, but definitely some more digging in on defense for me. There's a lot to look at here. What about you?
Yeah, I really like the Patriots first glance. 2,400. Nobody will go there because they all think that Deshaun Watson is the second coming of Jesus. So nobody is going to go with Patriots 2,400. I like the Cardinals, like you mentioned, 2,500. And then I think that you could probably go Chargers for 2,800. We know they have a really, really good pass rush, and we know they're a very, very good defense. People might be a little bit higher on Mahomes than they should be. So I don't really see myself paying over 3K this first week for a defense. I'll probably just load up on stuff like that. But yeah, I think the Ravens should be 3,800, and I think they deserve to be because Josh Allen's a train wreck. And I think that the top price defenses make sense a lot. I could see myself playing the Ravens and the Jaguars in cash for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great point. In cash games, pay up for defense. Like, I have no problem paying up for defense in cash game. Get that. That's a solid floor more often than not. So make it work. It got a little crazy towards the end there with the Jags being like $4,500 for defense. But hey, they get you 20-plus points a week.
Like, they were scoring a touchdown every game. Like,
I was saying, they were getting you 20-plus points a week.
It was ridiculous.
It was absolutely crazy. Well, that'll wrap up our first edition of this season, James. A lot of good strategy talk. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. We had 3 or 4 or 5 multiple people coming in and out watching it now, and they didn't even know we were recording yet. So it'll be a lot of fun once we get going. Any final words? Let people know where they can find you on Twitter and everything, and we'll wrap her up.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at paydirt_DFS. I will tweet out my Twitch link as well for when I do kind of those building things and those strategies things. I'm not sure what day I'm going to do it, but I'll keep everybody updated, obviously. And if I do write through the Daily Roto season, I'm sure that I'm not going to be writing too much, but when I do, you can find me over at Daily Roto. Fantastic site, fantastic projections, fantastic optimizer. Love those guys with everything I am. So that's where you can find me, and I will be active all season.
And I won't be able to do it justice, so I'd like you to plug it. I know you plugged it last year. Can you, if you know the information, what is Drew Dinkmeyer up to this time?
So he's doing the Wellymaker again. And you can find him over on Twitter. Everybody knows his handle. He's just Dink. He's got millions of followers. He is donating $10,000 for every $10,000 that is donated. So he's matching. They were able to raise over 40 grand last year, which was absolutely incredible. And he's doing it all the way through the month of September. So that's an absolutely fantastic cause. Throw $5, $10, whatever you can. If you want to do any more research on what Charity Water is, they're an entirely nonprofit that builds water systems for communities that have never had them before. And it's just a really, really good cause. So thank you for reminding me of that, because that's a really, really good thing that Dink is doing. And I know that he's teaming up with Charity Water themselves this year. So yeah, definitely go check that out.
Yeah, I saw little bits of it, but I know I don't know all the details like you do. And it's a phenomenal cause. It's a great cause because a lot of places don't have drinking water. People don't think about that. It's pretty crazy. So go check that out. I'm on Twitter at BDintric, and we'll be rocking and rolling with this all year. Hit us up with any questions. Again, the podcast, the Twitter handle is at 2PTCONV short for 2-point conversion DFS. So come check us out there with whatever you got. And we'll be back next week. We record on Wednesdays, and we will break down the entire week 1 slate. By then, they should have the Thursday night game and the Sundays and Mondays. So we can break it all down for you and give it a go. But until then, thanks for listening. Catch you guys next time.
Bye.